Hey y'all, what is going on? What is going on? It's your girl, Melba Pearson, Melba for Miami, Melba for Justice, also known as the resident legal diva. And it is time for another Mondays with Melba. So, uh, there's so much going on with the legislative session that I'm going to just take a whole other show to unpack because things are happening fast and furious. So I'm going to be sending out a newsletter later on today just to kind of update folks on what's happening. I'll probably try and do a quick short video just on the different bills that are now being debated in the House floor as well as the Senate floor and that are about to really go to a vote. But we had a lot of things get signed into law in the last couple of weeks. So again, stay woke, folks, because Florida is just popping right now and not necessarily in the best of ways. But that is not the reason why we're here talking today. Today, we have an amazing author, an amazing activist, woman of God, who has written this book following this man's experience in prison and how he has been able to triumph in some ways despite still being behind bars. So without any further ado, welcome to Mondays with Melba, Cassandra McCray, and thank you for being on today.
No, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be on Mondays with Melba. I really thank you for this opportunity.
My pleasure. My pleasure. So, if you could share a little bit about yourself and sort of your journey of how you got into this sort of advocacy and activism.
Okay, well, I always consider myself a Miami-Dade girl. I will always be a 305 chick for
305 till
life.
I die. Hey.
I'm the founder and president of Living My Purpose Fully Incorporated. It's a nonprofit organization. I'm an evangelist, a 7-time international best-selling author, 8-time Amazon best-selling author. I'm now into the civil rights initiative, activist, entrepreneur, mother, grandmother, a whole bunch of hats, but I'll leave it up on the knot.
And you wear them all flawlessly. That
Oh, thank
most
you.
importantly.
Although I was born in North Florida, I lived in Dade County for 20 years. And I think I got the most of my diversity was from Miami-Dade.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Mhm. And so throughout the years, from work experience, helping people and through the church, helping people that's like Cassandra, helping families. Um, it just all just came into one. And then the past couple years, it really, when I started the civil rights initiative part of it, um, about the wrongfully convicted, because there are many. And
Yeah.
so that's my baby now. So it makes my belly leap to be able to talk about it and help those that are voiceless behind the wall.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, yeah, if you could share a little bit more about the book, which is 4393. And that's basically talking about, going from being behind bars to still being behind bars, but living in your purpose. The story of Leroy Plump, his nickname is Plump Jones. So, how did you kind of first hear about his story and how did you get involved with him?
Okay. Well, his name is Leroy Plump Rogers.
Rogers. Excuse me, Rogers.
That's
My
okay.
apologies, Mr. Rogers. My apologies.
That's okay. And 4393, which is makes the 30th anniversary of the horrific um, incident that happened in 1993, April the 3rd, 1993, involving the German tourist murder. And he is one of the cases. So today marks the 30th anniversary, not only of her death, but his life changing as well. And me knowing him and for over 20 something years and helping him with case law, trying to effortlessly get an ear to somebody to hear these motions that were just going to wayside. And he had very good merits. And I've done some research on his case because of my experience with the little bit of law that I do know how to bootleg, the little law that I knew how to bootleg. He had some great. I discovered about 10 discrepancies that took place during that rat race trial. And I know you was a freshman state attorney when that happened.
That was before me. That's even right before my time. So
You were
I
still in New
definitely did
York.
not even cross the path at all. Wasn't there, wasn't me.
But
Check the camera, it wasn't me.
it wasn't me. But yeah, this journey has been going on for 30 years. This fight, his family has been enduring this fight for 30 years. And just being able to help him with whatever I can, as a voice. But as far as the civil rights activist part, at first it started out in the book last year. I released the Joseph Anointing. I had 5 guys come together. That was an international bestseller. They came in and they talked about how their life sentences was changed, how their sentences was drastically reduced, and they came home. So I base everything back to the Bible. This is another case of Joseph being wrongfully accused. Leroy was sitting in the back seat of the car that allegedly had ran over, had incidentally killed Miss Jensen. So you tell me how you could be in the back seat of a car, a 2-door car, with no DNA taken. You sit in the back seat. You wasn't driving. You didn't snatch your purse. And what happened? Even with the forensic tire mark that was found on her, did not match the vehicle that they had confiscated, and they gave the vehicle back to the owner. So
let's back up for a second, because not everybody may be familiar with the underlying case we're talking about. So this, in the 80s and 90s, you're just going to give this kind of brief history, and then Cassandra back to you to really talk about the facts of the case. But during the 80s and 90s in Florida, there were a ton of tourist robberies. That was the thing. Now it's fentanyl, it's carjacking, whatever. But back then it was tourist robberies. So when you drove as a tourist out of, Miami International Airport, you had, it was clear that your plates were not, local plates. And so that made you a target of carjackers. And unfortunately, that with the huge drug crisis, the cartels and all the madness that was going on, the 80s and 90s, early 90s especially, were very crazy in Miami. So this was part of that broader crackdown to make sure that tourists could come and be safe. But of course, the flip side is you got to make sure you got the right person, right? So, so talk a little bit more about that actual, the case, and sort of, based on your understanding and what he's presented, kind of what went down.
Okay. Like I said, Miss Jensen, her mother, and her 2 children had just just landed, and they were on a rental car. And if you don't know Miami and the 112, you will get lost anywhere,
Mm-hmm.
And by my understanding of the case, they would bump. This is how the robbers would do, because it's several Florida tourist cases. This is just one of the many. But the catch was you bump the car, and then however you snatch and grab the purse. That was the thing. Leroy was not the driver. Like I said, he was on his way to. He caught a ride with those guys, and to go see his daughter. She was born that December. Here it is, April 3rd. So barely a 4-month-old baby. And so they had what do you call it, APB out for a beige car. Well, the car they were in was blue. So it was all kinds of the next 2 days was crazy. They didn't even interview the mother, which is the child's grandmother, as an eyewitness. Where was she at? Did she not see nothing, not hear nothing? But she was not even a part of the case, a part of the investigation. They sat there and interviewed a 6-year-old until his father came from Germany and the little boy was like, no, the car is beige. But the cop says, no, it's blue. And
Oh boy.
it's a difference in beige and blue. I don't care if you're German, French, Haitian, Mexican, the color spectrum is totally different. So they, of course, they got the little boy to finally they coached him to say blue. And what they said was the reason Leroy got the most time, life in 15 years. And then the co-defendant, which was the driver of a light blue car, he got life in 30 because he was already on probation for other charges. Leroy didn't have any type of these kind of crimes in his background. When I pulled his arrest history, I didn't see anything of this aggressive nature. Especially back then, they was RICOing people back, and all that. So
let me pause you there for a second. So just again, because sometimes we use terms of art that we know, but not everybody else knows. So, basically what we're talking about is, there were multiple people in the tourist vehicle, basically the victim car, right? And so you had a mom, her mother, so a mom, a grandmother, and a baby boy, a young boy, 6-year-old boy, right? And so they were interviewed as part of, this investigation. And of course, when you have a young child, you have to be very careful on how you question them because of the fact that they can easily be led, right? And, stories can change and all of that. So we know now, especially 2023, we know now that we've got to have special therapists usually present in the room to talk to kids because of the trauma and all of that. But again, most of that stuff was not, if any, most of that stuff was not in place in the 80s and 90s. So we approach things very differently now. So there's that. And then when we talk about the APB, that's an all points bulletin, basically saying everybody be on the lookout for this specific car because it matches the description of a vehicle that was part of a robbery, a murder, whatever the case may be. So sorry, just we always want to make sure that folks understand and we're educating folks along the way. So when they hear these terms, they know what's being said. Sorry, go ahead.
That's fine. Because the actual night the lady got hit, what she did, the way I understand, she got out the car trying to retrieve her purse back, slipped and fell, and that's when the vehicle ran over her. She wasn't even pronounced dead on the scene. When she got to the hospital, she still was alive. But the guys, the APB got put out on the guys the next day. They did not go to jail or anything that night of the robbery, or the night of the incident. The next day was when they had an all points bulletin out for them. And once again, Leroy's walking and he gets scooped up by the police. And that's when they start all this planting evidence in the vehicle. Meanwhile, an incident had been that night when the lady got killed. Another lady had got her purse taken, snatched. Mm-hmm. They threw that purse in the river. So they went and dragged that out, trying to get stuff to plant on them. So the lady had, that second lady that had her purse snatched, end up bringing the labels. They gave her purse and stuff back. They gave Miss Jensen's labels. I guess when you come on vacation, you're gonna stay a while. Mm-hmm. She had mailing labels, like for the envelopes.
Way back when people mail stuff, yeah.
Yeah, way back when. No email for real, right? Well, anyway, she brought them to the police station because they was like, okay, well, how did they get that? How did she get them? The police actually kind of like mixed it up. But they was
so in other words, a whole different lady received evidence in this case, and she was not tied to the case at all. Like, she just had her purse snatched, separate issue, goes to get her stuff back because, hey, the cops were like, hey, come in, we've recovered your belongings. And she receives the belongings that belonged to the lady who was killed.
Yes.
Wow.
They, of course, they paid her off. And a few people that that's on here are familiar with the Miami City Boys.
The River Cops?
City Cops, yeah.
The River Cops, yeah.
The
Mhm.
River Cops. That
Unfortunately, you know that case too well.
they were more in the 80s. So here you hear, and we're in the early 90s, you got the copycats. They know about the old ones, the 80 ones. But the 1990s, 93 ones, they want to try to still keep that regime going on. And so when they get Leroy in, of course, they separate the defendants, you know, the suspects, and they jump him. They beat him. They jumped him, and they made him sign a written statement that he was this involved in this and that, and trying to do like the River Cops. They was beating people into confessions.
And now let me also kind of add another little detail on that. So for those who don't know, who were not in Miami at the time, and me, like I grew up in New York, so I knew nothing of this until I moved down here much later. The River Cops were a group of City of Miami police officers that literally were running drugs, were beating people, were killing. They were running like a cartel. And there were indictments, and all of these, you know, the majority of them either ended up in a coffin or ended up in a prison cell. And that's part of the legacy of the city of Miami, that, you know, there's that deep distrust from the community because they've seen, you know, especially if you came up in the city, you've seen the way they were able to operate and get away with it for decades until, you know, finally the feds came in and all of that. So that's the story of the River Cops. Okay, go ahead, Cassandra.
Well, needless to say, the copycats, which many are still on the force and have gotten promoted. I won't name any names. But when I look on LinkedIn, they're still with the force, in different municipalities as well. So that was the case. Speedy trial. Their Leroy's attorney was Mr. Seigel. If anybody ever heard of Mr. Seigel, well, we already know that Mr. Seigel, he had two charges, fees. I'm saying he either had a $500 one or a 3,000, like 5,000. So it's based on what you bring. if you got a 5,000, he might take a deposition, but if you ain't got no money, you get what you pay for. And needless to say, no deposition was taken on Leroy during this. The trial was a rat race because the way Mr. Seigel performed, he was performative in the courtrooms. So they got sick and tired of this. This is a highly publicized case. You're not going to mess up the Florida tourism money. You got the German consulate, all this. And at that time, I can't remember the name of the governor. Not Jeb Bush, but the older.
It would be Lawton Childs.
Lawton Childs, yes.
Okay, yeah.
And you ain't finna mess up this money. So get whoever you can get, and let's make an example of it. So that's Leroy end up being the sacrificial lamb and the fall guy. So they say one of the main reasons Leroy got the most time was because he didn't show any emotion. Emotion as in regretful, emotion as sorry. Well, if you in shock yourself of what's taking place, how can you show remorse? And you can't show remorse for something you didn't do. And so, and it was said that the German father said if he wanted Leroy to tell on him, but the code of ethics in the streets back then, you don't do that. You take it like a man, whatever it is you take it like a man, it comes. And so, thinking that he can win, he already knew he wasn't going to win in the courts. He thought he was at least going to win at least in the appeals. And it's just been a fight ever since. And so with this being today marking the 30th anniversary 30th anniversary of this horrific, incident. Leroy being gone 30 years, not being able to see his children get raised, not having that opportunity to raise his children because if anybody that meets him, he's very loving, compassionate, willing to help anybody, and that's what this book, and this what that is what is displayed in this book. And I ask him often. I said, and he'll tell you in the book, he's not bitter.
Wow.
I'll be still upset.
Wow.
I would still be upset, and I ask him. He is on no psychotropic meds. He's very athletic. He's in evangelism. He's a part of the faith-based character program. So I asked him one day, I says, how do you maintain yourself? I mean, we out here in the streets and losing our minds. How do you keep it? And he says, prison saved him.
Wow. Why did you say that?
When you read the book, I did not realize this until I was typing the book. Leroy suffered from low self-esteem as a young man, very athletic in school. I mean, getting ready to take the middle school to just the next step. He's really athletic in all three sports: basketball, football, and baseball. So he was that shining star. And then when he got up in age, because he already had a son that was already born. The kids are 2 years apart, so he became a father really early. So what he had to do, you probably might sell something here, there, and there, but as far as robbing and killing, he didn't even own a gun. So now, if anything, you in this rat race trial, your life is flashing before your eyes. You got this attorney that think everything is performative, and your whole life is gone.
Right. Wow. Yeah. So just, a couple more questions before we wrap up for today. But, in talking to him and learning about his story and all of that, what is the key message he wants everyone to know as a result of this experience that he's had thus far?
One, it's not where you start, it's where you end. Just because you started out in prison, he was 24 when he went to prison. He'll be 54 in July. He's a man of God. And don't look at people at their circumstances. And and our prayers tonight, that whoever sees this video, that it will fall on their hearts, that representation. He needs a voice. He needs a voice more than just Cassandra. Yeah, I go and stand in the paint, for my clients. I'll do whatever I have to do to type up whatever I need. But I don't have that. I don't have that voice that is needed when he has motions put in, and that I'm sure y'all you worked in it. The stack is this high. Next. You're not reading. He's had a 3.88 is what is it called?
3.850 ineffective assistance of counsel, meaning your defense attorney didn't do the proper job to be able to defend you in court.
He's had that. And what he needs is a voice that can go in and say, Your Honor, this is what we found. And even with the research that I found, I have a spreadsheet of stuff. So many similarities. You got to remember, in 93 we had O.J. Simpson going on. We had all kinds of stuff going on. So you can go say, okay, black man, white woman, black California, Florida, all of these similarities that you can, when you do case law and you're looking at looking at cases to try to find the similarities to see how you can use that as emotion. That O.J. Simpson case is one of the cases that that I quoted, but in his book he quoted two other cases, which I didn't even know. Robin Givens evidently was in a high. I guess she was from Miami. I never knew that, but he quoted Robin Givens. She was in an incident because she had money. She got off. So I don't remember that case, but but he quoted several in his book. He quoted several Miami stars that got off because they had money. Everything was political and everything was money.
And sadly, that's something we still deal with today, right? That the disparities in the system of, hey, if you can afford a high-priced lawyer, then certain benefits open up to you, and it shouldn't be that way, right? It shouldn't matter the amount of money you have in your bank account as someone who's charged with a crime, or if you are a survivor or the family member of someone that was victimized by a crime, you should be treated the same way, whether you're the person that was harmed was wealthy or the person that was harmed was, came from an under-resourced community. So again, it's getting back to the heart of what does representation look like in our criminal justice system and what should it look like? So that's really key. So in these last couple minutes, can you tell people where they can find the book and also where they can reach out to you to either lend support, learn more, or just follow you and support you in whatever you're working on?
Well, thank you, first of all, for giving that opportunity. In the chat, if you can put it in the,
I'll put it in the comment.
Okay, post it in the comment. The ebook is $2.99. They can get that tonight, and then they can also order the hard copy, which will take about a week or so for it to be mailed to them. So the two links that I put in the comments, if you could post it, and I already posted on my page, but for your followers, you can copy and paste that. And you can follow me here on Facebook at The Tomorrow Changer. Because if you put Cassandra McCray, you're gonna see different names. I have different pages for different reasons. But for most of my literary work and my civil rights work is this page right here. Thank you. Somebody copied and pasted for me just.
Oh, perfect. Okay.
Thank you.
And of course, reminding everyone, if you are watching this either on YouTube or Facebook or Instagram, the link to the book is going to be in the comments. If you are listening to this on the podcast, the link to the book is going to be in the body of the description of this episode. So that way you can click on it. You can get the e-version, have it on your Kindle or your Apple, your iPad, whatever. But just again, educate yourself, learn more about this case and other cases, because again, we'd like to think that these are isolated incidents, but sadly they're not. And there's a lot of times there's more to the story than people realize. And also things were done very differently decades ago than they are today. So we have to keep in mind that there's been advances in science and DNA, all those different, fingerprints. We don't do, bite impressions from teeth the same way we did 20, 30 years ago, because that's been debunked. So all of these things we have to keep in mind that things were different back then. And we have to, again, raise our voices around injustice or any disparities within the criminal justice system, because, injustice anywhere is a problem, period. So with that, thank you so much for coming on, Cassandra. Thank you everyone for tuning in. Next week is going to be about guns. Permitless carry just passed here in Florida. So we're going to talk a little bit about what that means and what folks should be thinking about as this kind of new world is emerging. So with that, take good care. Thank you again, Cassandra, and y'all stay safe and stay woke. Bye.